Welcome back to the final episodes of Agatha All Along, where we see that they take all the goodwill that I had for episode 7, throw it in a fire, and tells me I was a complete idiot for getting my hopes up. Episode 8 opens with Rio, now Death, informing Alice that she died, and Alice being in disbelief that the thing she was told not to do to Agatha because it will kill her ends up killing her. Who could have guessed? As Alice is taken to the afterlife, Jen and Billy grieve over Lilia's sacrifice, with Rio appearing before Agatha to chastise her for hiding Billy from her, as his existence has caused a disturbance in the forces of life and death. She goes on to say that if he finds Tommy, that will cause another of these events to happen and disrupt things even further, and she can't kill him because he will reincarnate in a different body. So Billy needs to surrender himself to her so she can claim him. Agatha says that she will get Billy to do so, only if Rio agrees to leave her alone in both life and the afterlife, which Rio agrees with. A few questions, the most explicit one being the fuck. Now, as bizarre and nonsensical as episode 6 was, it did seem that the main reason why Billy was put in Williams's body is that it was because he just so happened to be the closest fresh dead body near the hex when it disappeared, with his soul being trapped in that body as it had no soul and was the closest one. Ignoring the fact that Billy was never real in the first place, so I don't know why any of this happened, but whatever. But here it's described that Billy's soul can actually just go wherever it wants when it dies and can't be taken by death, but at the end of the day his soul would leave his body and be in Death's realm, which we saw with Alice. So I don't really understand why she wouldn't be able to take him, as he would still have to leave Williams's body and be in her realm. It just seems very vague and contradictory, which is Billy's entire character in a nutshell. And it just seems like the plot is trying to make up random excuses about why Rio can't achieve her goal yet, when really based on what we know, she should be able to just take him and sort things out in the afterlife. Also, there's this shot of Rio leaving the scene, and before some of you try and explain away this part, I'm going to circle back to it later to explain why it doesn't work. Billy and Jen are talking about Agatha, and at one point Agatha just appears behind Billy. We see in one cut that there's no one behind him, and then immediately after switching to a different shot, she's just there. Terrific editing as always. They end up finding their shoes, which they took off at the start of the road, showing they have now made a circle, with the group all getting frustrated with each other and Billy putting his shoes back on, which then puts him in a body bag in a morgue. And when they try and figure out the trial, Jen realizes that it was Agatha that bound her and took her magic. Jen gets her magic back by saying an unbinding ritual, aka shouting in her face for 10 times. As Jen gets her powers back, she disappears, as the road gave her what she was missing, and therefore she can no longer be on it. And during this whole scene, the trial has not progressed at all. It started to progress right at the start, but during the entire unbinding ritual and Jen disappearing scene, the ritual just decides it can't be arsed and waits for Agatha and Billy to focus before starting up again. Agatha tries to help Billy locate Tommy, and as he focuses, he places Tommy's soul in the body of a drowning boy, which causes him to vanish, leaving Agatha all alone. Opening her locket, Agatha sees the hair of her son and a flower seed, which she then proceeds to grow in the room, passing the trial. Agatha appears in her backyard and is confused that now that she has passed the road, she doesn't have her powers back. I want you to remember this for later. She is confronted by Rio, who proceeds to torture her before Billy arrives, who now not only has full control of his powers, but somehow is capable of attacking the physical embodiment of death. Billy proceeds to give Agatha some of his power, and during this entire time, Rio decides to not do anything. She just sits on the side chilling and waiting until the script allows her back in. Despite fighting back against her for a little bit, they realise they can't fight death, and that one of them will have to go with her, with Billy volunteering, and much to his shock, Agatha insists he can be taken instead of her. And I really need the writers to tell me why they decided to make Billy such a fucking idiot. He just constantly keeps trusting Agatha over and over and over again, and every time she gets an opportunity to win something, she fucks everyone else over, including him. And he says he's not going to trust her again, but he still keeps trusting her. He manages to win her over, sure, but that doesn't change the fact that once again she was going to fuck him over and he will just forgive her by the start of the next episode. Having a main protagonist that starts out gullible and just stays that way until right till the very end of the series, as we'll see in the next episode, is just really so annoying to watch. And even then he doesn't fully change by the end of next episode, he's just bit less gullible. Billy talks to Agatha in her head and asks if she let her son get taken by death as well, which convinces her to be taken instead. But this doesn't really make any sense. Rio wanted Billy because he and Tommy are unnatural and disrupt the natural order of life and death. Agatha dying doesn't change that. So how does this solve her problem in any way when she still has these abominations running around? Billy goes home, and after looking around his room, he realizes that a lot of the elements on his walls and shelves match what he saw on the Witch's Road. And so it is revealed that the Witch's Road was not real and that it was created by him, with Agatha's ghost appearing behind him as the episode ends. This episode is atrocious. However, I'm going to save my critique of this episode and combine it with the finale to explain why everything just doesn't work. Episode 9 opens with Agatha giving birth in the 17th century, and when Rio arrives to take her son, she begs her not to, with Rio agreeing not to take him now, but she will have to come after him one day. After giving birth, Agatha goes to a nearby coven and drains the witches of their power, killing them, with it being shown that she has started to use Nicholas to lure witches to her in order to kill them and become more powerful. Nicholas is uncomfortable with the witches dying, but being a child, he has no choice but to obey Agatha, and he starts to sing a song. At some point, Nicholas gets sick, and after going to bed one night, he is taken by Rio, with Agatha becoming devastated by his loss and corrupts the song they used to sing together, turning it into the Witch's Road to lure witches to her and steal their powers, doing so throughout the years until the present day, when she is shocked that the road has opened up in episode 2. Circling back to what I said in my review of the first 2 episodes, Agatha's plan was indeed stupid, as she knew the Witch's Road was fake and just wanted the girls to attack her to drain their powers, but also warned them not to attack her so she couldn't drain their powers, meaning she gathered these girls together for absolutely no reason. It also makes no sense why she recruited Jen and Lilia in the first place, as Lilia's powers focus more on premonition and character reading, and Jen has no magic as she is bound, meaning the only person that she could have drained was Alice, and the rest of the group could have killed the extremely weak Agatha through other means once the deception was revealed to them, if the Salem 7 didn't kill her first. In the present, Agatha's ghost appears to Billy and confirms that the road is something he made up, with Billy being heartbroken that he killed the others during their quest for nothing, although Agatha reveals that she was going to kill Jen as well, who managed to escape, so technically he actually saved her life. Also, there's no reason given as to why Agatha is a ghost now, she just is. She wanted her locket that Billy now has, but if someone wanting something before they die is enough for them to break free of the afterlife and become a ghost, you'd think literally everywhere would be covered in ghosts, because that pretty much sums up a lot of people. Billy arrives at Agatha's house and starts to do a banishing ritual, wanting Agatha to be sent to hell, and reveals he doesn't care about her anymore. Congrats, Billy. A few episodes late, but better late than never. I hope you don't ruin this character development in the next minute. Agatha states she doesn't want to go to the afterlife as she is afraid to see her son, and Billy shows her mercy, with the two of them setting off to try and find Tommy. Oh well, Billy, you had character development for, what, a minute? That's good enough, isn't it? Now, despite me getting annoyed at Billy, again, the final episode by itself isn't anything too egregious. I found the dialogue to be a lot less cringy, the emotional moments were better, and it was nice to see that while they did give Agatha a soft spot, they didn't try and reform her, and continue to show her as the self-centered, power-driven individual that she was, even with someone she loves. But combining this episode with all of the others, this series, and therefore this finale, was just terrible. Let's look at events in chronological order and see how things just do not add up whatsoever. For a start, Billy and Tommy were never real people. They were basically a form of split personality created by Wanda's mind, given physical form by the Hex. Physical form. She is not Jesus Christ. She is not God. She did not give them any sort of spiritual form or any other weird magical bullshit, just physical, which was removed when Wanda removed the Hex. So it makes absolutely no sense for these two to just now exist as they do. If they exist, then Wanda would know about it because she created them, which makes the end scene of WandaVision and Multiverse of Madness make no sense, because that was the whole point of those scenes. They don't exist in her universe anymore, she can't sense them. So she is using the Darkhold to check out other universes to find copies of them. Agatha was also placed in a spell of Wanda's which would make her act like the nosy neighbour she was pretending to be throughout the WandaVision series, fully aware of what is going on but being unable to do anything about it, leaving her screaming in silence. Now, Wanda dying might have apparently corrupted the spell, which if that is the case then it makes sense for her to randomly believe she is a detective. What doesn't make sense is that she has no knowledge on the passing of time between WandaVision and now. After being freed from the spell, she is shocked to learn that she has been under the spell's effects for 3 years, except a year passed between WandaVision and Multiverse of Madness, and presumably the spell placed on her would become corrupted over time and not straight away, which means that Agatha should be aware that she has been under the spell's effect for at least a year and a bit, as she should have been conscious in her body at the time. But no, apparently she has no recollection of anything between Wanda putting her under the spell and now. Over the next few years, the town was secured, and a cover story was established by the government that this was an Avengers training exercise gone wrong. And you're telling me that over the course of 3 years, absolutely no one has told the news or the internet anything about what happened. No one decided that Wanda needed to be held accountable and inform the public that a rogue superhero terrorized them. No one said anything. All these people who are now traumatized by Wanda, who absolutely despise her, wouldn't say a single thing that would tarnish her reputation. On top of this, despite no longer having her vast amount of power or any sort of concealment spells in place to protect herself, Agatha somehow isn't killed by a whole bunch of witches who hate her, which according to Rio and Jen is a lot of people, including the Salem 7. She was just allowed to live in peace by herself for 3 years without interruption. Billy, over the course of 3 years, somehow managed to learn so much stuff that he now has created a book on witchcraft full of spells and other rituals, but somehow doesn't seem to know any witches that he could have learnt them from, not knowing any of the witches in the nearby community. He then proceeds to track Agatha down and free her from the spell. Now, as we learn in episode 8, the tell that Billy had that convinced Agatha that he was Wanda's son was the fact that he created the Witch's Road, showing a strong amount of hex magic, which Billy wouldn't use until the end of episode 2. So why Agatha chooses to keep him around after he frees her makes no sense, because there's nothing here for her to gain until then. She doesn't really care about the sigil placed on him, and she knows she is being hunted by other witches, and time is of the essence if she wants to get her powers back in time to defend herself. And Billy tells her he can't really control his powers, so the odds of him attacking her and her draining his powers is basically none. Her going on this journey with Billy is nonsense, and she only does so because the script basically tells her to, as is her decision to recruit Billy, Lilia and Jen for the Witch's Road. As mentioned, Alice is the only one with powers that could attack her and give her strength back. Lilia's powers are more mental focused. Jen currently has no powers, and Agatha doesn't remember being the one who bound them, so she wouldn't know to try and free them. And Billy has powers, but he can't really control it at this time, and so there's no reason to suspect he would attack her either. On top of this, she wants them not to attack her so she can't steal their powers. So not only does she pick a load of bad choices, but these bad choices don't really matter at all because she fucks herself over. The only positive that comes from the hex being something that Billy made up is that it helps explain why Mrs. Davies is able to help summon it despite not being a witch. That's the only thing I'm going to say that's positive about the rules of the road, because nothing else makes sense. Now, certain aspects of the road do make sense. Some of the scenery and trials do because they're just basic witchcraft things, like a Ouija board and the Wizard of Oz and things like that. That's fair enough. But some of these specifics are just so fucked. If the road and everything in it are based on his perception of the road and his knowledge, then how does some of these trials happen? How does he know to create this specific type of poison? He doesn't know this poison or its effects, only Jen does. But somehow his mind thinks up a poison that actually exists that he doesn't have any knowledge on. Same thing with Alice. Her mother warned her that she is cursed, but that's all the knowledge that she has on the matter. She wasn't even sure if the burn scars were from a demon or from the motel fire. Yet Billy apparently had enough subconscious knowledge to put the demon and its curse into the trial. How could he possibly know these things? Why is there a bunch of random underground tunnels that would serve no real purpose when the road is based on the one from the Wizard of Oz? He believes that people who get knocked into the mud die and is very remorseful when he thinks he killed Jen and Lilia. So clearly, based on his mind, he doesn't think there should be any tunnels under the road. So why are there? And of course, the fact that this is all a hex makes me question the point of this scene. In WandaVision, we saw what hex magic looks like for those trapped inside. Everything seems normal until you get to the edges, upon which the hex wall starts to appear to those near it. Here, they didn't want to give away the spoiler that this is a hex, so they just changed how the hex magic was used previously and gave us this awkward backdrop scene, which on top of just looking cheap, now seems extremely lazy to just try and hide one specific thing. Now, despite the fact that she shouldn't be able to know who Billy is, despite recruiting 3 witches who can't really use magic to try and steal their powers, and despite the fact that assassins know where she is and are trying to kill her, Agatha spends time getting them to do the spell and is then surprised when it works, going along the road but being totally aware that this is a survival game. She knows it's not real, there is no prize. She just wants to see what Billy will do. Yet, for some reason, when it's just Agatha and Rio in her garden, and with the two of them knowing that the road was fake, Agatha still screams on about how she completed the road and should be getting her powers back, despite acknowledging that it was fake and she was never going to get her powers back. Almost like the show has lied to the audience several times, either by randomly changing the rules or making the characters act against their best interests and knowledge, in order to set up a twist at the end. Almost like that's not how you set up a twist. Also, the hex is in Agatha's basement, so how the fuck did Jen get teleported all the way to the end of the town's borders? And why is Rio just fine with this ending? She says that both Billy and Tommy are abominations that are having a negative effect on the balance of life and death. They are problems that need correcting. And then in the end she just lets Billy go and apparently doesn't care about Tommy anymore. Why would you set up a villain hating this one specific thing, then be fine with 2 of them just existing afterwards? So, to sum up Agatha All Along, the actors can be good when given the chance with some small pieces of good material. They stuck to their guns and just kept Agatha as a shit person with a small weak spot instead of trying to make her some misunderstood tragic figure. Some of the CGI and special effects I appreciate. The twist at the end would have been great if they handled it with any measure of care. And I appreciate that they tried to have the episodes resemble a certain style of horror and witchcraft for each trial, in a similar vein to how WandaVision handled its episodes and sitcoms. On the other hand, most of the dialogue between these characters is desperate attempts to be funny and snarky, which falls flat about 95% of the time. The characters aren't given any interesting characterization, and when they do, they usually just die shortly afterwards. The rules of magic are randomly changed to tell a joke. The events that kick everything off only really happen not because the characters use their brain or knowledge of the witching world, but because the script says they need to do this stuff for the rest of the series to happen, so they do it, regardless of how stupid or nonsensical it comes across in hindsight. We are told that the initial main bad guys are powerful witches dedicated solely to killing Agatha, and yet they usually just end up walking and standing around not doing anything, not using their magic when they could kill people, getting knocked out by a plank of wood, and then dying in about 30 seconds by falling on some swords, despite the fact that they can shapeshift into animals that not only could fit in between the gaps of the swords, but some of them are animals like birds, which can fly. And once they're gone, the new main bad guy explains their main goal, only to give up on it for no random reason, despite the fact that her problem has now doubled in size. Overall, Agatha All Along is exactly like WandaVision. Dumbed down, incoherent, nonsensical, with side characters receiving very little development unless they are building up to something big, and the main ones doing random things that go against their interests just to keep the series going, with some plot twists that would have been very good and impactful if they weren't nonsensical. I think the only thing that I can praise this show over WandaVision is the fact that the creator didn't try and bait big characters that they knew weren't going to appear in the series, like what happened with Quicksilver, the X-Men and Mephisto. And even then, I don't know if that makes it better, because to make up for this they decided to add some excruciating dialogue to compensate for it. Agatha All Along is like the rest of Marvel post Endgame. Hacked out, incoherent, a script that obviously needed a few more drafts, trying to use humour to make up for its lack of substance, except the humour isn't very good, so that lacks substance as well. And overall, it's just a complete waste of everyone's time. Thanks for watching, lads and lasses. If you enjoyed this video, please consider liking, subscribing and checking out some of my other videos. Sharing always helps, and if you're feeling really generous, please consider my Patreon or YouTube membership. I also have a Twitter and occasionally I do live streams. But most of all, I just hope you had a great day, and hopefully I will see you in the next video.